So tonight we have Ashwin Chacko here with us, and Ashwin is going to go through a guide to maximising social media. So Ashwin, I'm going to let you take it away, and I will join you about 8 minutes before the end, and I will read out the questions that people can have popped in the chat as we go through the session, so that as questions come into their mind, they can write them down, and the chat will act as a memory bank for us all. So thank you for leading the session, and we're looking forward to learning with and from you.
Thanks for having me. All right, amazing. So hey everybody, my name is Ashwin Chacko, and I'm a positively playful visual storyteller, an author, and a motivational speaker. So I thought I'd start by sharing a little bit of my story, and then because this is geared to publishers or like people looking to publish their books, so I'm going to tell a little bit about my self-publishing journey, how I went through that, now how I utilized social media to get to where I am today. All right, so if we're going to start, we got to start all the way at the start. So as far back as I can remember, I've always drawn, and I remember at the age of 5 or 6 asking my mother, can I draw for a living? She's like, maybe, we'll see. Well, it took 26 years, 2 countries, and 3 kids later for me to finally say, I draw for a living. Woohoo! All right. So speaking of drawing, one of the big things I always wanted to do was write children's books. And in 2018, I made my first attempt at writing a kid's book. It was called Into the Woods We Go. So I was super kicked, super excited, pumped, wrote the whole book, started drawing out all the scenes, got the roughs. And this is some of the pieces that were done for it. Looked up lots of different publishers, sent it out. And 1 year later, 6 months go by, nothing happens. 1 year later, I get one email. It's a no. It's been a year since I had the project. I was super pumped. And then now I had lost all motivation to keep working on that project. And so the idea of writing children's books closed, that chapter closed for a little while I continued to work on my other commercial illustration. Then in 2020, the world paused, and it gave me some time to question why was I doing what I was doing and what sort of impact I wanted my work to have. This is the moment I like to imagine where Gandalf turns up in my head, and he said, and I'm speaking to Gandalf, and I'm like, I wish it need not happen in my time. And Gandalf is like, so do I. But all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And so I had to consider, okay, we're in a pandemic. This is a pause. Everybody's paused. Let's reassess. Let's be strategic. Let's work out what I want to do. And the conclusion of that was I wanted to bring joy and encouragement in everything I do. And some of the areas I wanted to focus on was motivational speaking, children's books, and of course, commercial illustration. So I had a decision to make, okay? What do I do with this information? How do I start achieving that vision I had set out for myself? I decided to jump in head first and to self-publish. I was no longer going to wait for somebody to give me permission to create what I felt like I was made to create. And so first thing I did was wrote my story, and the story was what wondrous shapes we are. Second thing, super important when self-publishing, is to set a deadline, because when you're working with other publishers, they're going to give you deadlines and you're going to have to work to it. And so by setting a deadline for yourself, you don't have another project in the graveyard of unfinished projects. Number 3, plan the layout. So be professional, work out what the story is going to look like, thumbnails for the story, And this was my layout. These are my character designs that I was doing on the left. And then last, but number 4 is finish the book, make it print ready. So it's ready to be printed, but your job's not finished yet. What's next? You got to budget, print, and market your book. So you could do the most amazing book, but if you're not going to share it with anybody, nobody's going to buy it. They're not even going to know that you've made it, right? So how do you go about doing this? And this is where social media really comes into play. So spread the news. I made a book, please buy it. How do you go about doing that while still being authentic, without over marketing yourself, without just pointing at people and saying, buy my book? So this is the process I went through. I wrote to lots of different parents that I knew, and I sent the book to them. And I said, hey, I'm writing a book. Here's my book. Why don't you read it and give me some quotes? Tell me what you thought of the experience of reading this book with your children. And I got a bunch of quotes from them. Then I made a little video. I'm going to show it to you.
Ashwin, I think you might need to turn up the sound on the video.
Oh, hold on. Can you hear? Yeah, okay. Hey fam, my name is Ashwin Chacko. I'm an illustrator and designer, and this is my lovely wife, Becky. And today I'm excited to announce the launch of my brand new book, What Wonder Shapes We Are. This book in part was inspired by Becky's story, and so I'm going to let her tell it to you, and we'll chat more after.
So my story begins in my teen years. I was very self-conscious about my body, and I thought that you had to look a certain way, be a certain size in order to be accepted. And this wasn't because I was overweight or anything, it was just because things I saw on social media, pictures I saw in magazines, and that's what I thought she had to look like. And I had an amazing encounter with God, and He showed me that I'm perfect just the way I am. I love just the way I am and accepted. And there's a scripture in the Bible that says you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and each and every one of you are fearfully and wonderfully made just the way you are. Now that we have kids of our own, we want them to know that they are loved and accepted just the way they are. And they don't have to be like anyone else or act a different way in order to be loved or accepted. So that's why I actually made this book. It is full of wonderful colors, so you can teach your kids about colors and about shapes. And the greatest thing is that it has a deeper meaning behind it and teaches your kids that they are just perfect just how they are.
Oh, if you're interested in grabbing this book, you can go to my website, which is going to come up here, and grab as many copies as you like. Here's a few things that parents are saying about the book. And so this was the final book then. So I used social media to get the message out there. I told them the story behind the book. It's most important that you're not selling the product, but more so the intention behind the product. Because when we create something, we're creating it to solve some sort of problem, right? And if you can relate to people in a manner where you're hitting their emotional state and they're connecting to the story you're telling, then there's a connection made and they're more likely to buy into the product or the social aspects of your social media. All right, so these are some of the screens from the page. And so a year later, after I self-published my book and got it out on social media, I got some traction with some festivals like Wonderfest, as well as some other kids events. And this then led to a publisher in America reaching out to say, hey, would you be interested in doing a book with us? Because we saw that you did this book on social media, on Instagram, and we thought you'd be a great fit. And so using social media then gave me the traction to attract the type of client that I needed, aka the publisher in this case. So these are some screens from that book. So now to the deep, gritty workshop itself, or why do I need to be on social media? I mean, is it worth your time? I mean, it can feel like a time drain. You know, social media can feel daunting. It sometimes feels like you're standing in a crowded room and you're shouting, and you think to yourself, how can I be seen or heard? And even if I were seen, what would I say? You know? So one of the big mistakes I made was to think of social media as a secondary portfolio site. Yes, it's true in many ways it can be, but there are limitations to the potential of the platform. Our potential for growth on these platforms will be stunted. We are fortunate that we live in a digital age, so we no longer have to fight our way past gatekeepers to be seen. The platforms are the perfect tool to access a large audience and thus perfectly suited for marketing. So for instance, with the case study of What Wondrous Shapes We Are, I didn't have access to a publisher because I hadn't proven the fact that I was the least risky option. You have to remember, publishers are a business as much as anything else. And so how they choose the authors they work with is they need to see the potential of the investment they're going to put into you. And if you haven't proven to them to some degree that you are less of a threat to the potential profit that they're going to make, they're not going to invest in you. And so by self-publishing, I had proven to them that number one, I can finish a project from start to end. Number two, the ability or the storytelling aspect was there. Number three, the style and consistency across everything. And number four, the fact that it was sold across an audience and there was interest in the book. So these are little things that have now made me a slightly less risky option for a publisher, right? So before we dive any deeper into understanding social media, I think we need to relook at the word marketing. For many of us creatives, when you hear the word marketing, it's seen as like a dirty word, you know? It brings to it brings to your mind the sleazy salesman who's trying to sell you a shoddy car, or, you know, the guy who comes knocking on your door and is trying to get you to switch to board gosh or some other thing. And you're like, ugh, I never want to be that person, right? But Seth Godin has a fantastic way of shifting perception on marketing. And this is what he says. He says, great marketing is the generous and audacious work of saying, I see a better alternative. Come with me. So rather than selling something to them, you're saying, hey, I have a way to make your dreams a possibility. I can solve your problem, and this is how I can do it for you. And that switches your perspective on how you then relate to your audience and how your audience relates to you. Seth's view on marketing is now a conversation. It shifts our understanding from a place of self-service to one of serving others. And we must use this framework when we approach social media, because social media platforms are designed to be social. It's all about building and serving a community. So the first thing you have to do is to find out who is your audience, because you can't serve somebody you don't know or don't understand. It's like giving ice cream to somebody who hates ice cream. You're like, I know you love this product. And they're like, I don't like ice cream. No, thank you. Because you didn't know your audience, you can't relate to them. So if these platforms are all about serving your community, we need to start by first asking yourself, who do I serve? Who is my tribe? And what can I offer to solve their problem? You cannot serve someone you cannot see. Clarifying your audience and how you can help them will then inform the content you create. You can approach this two ways. The first is you do market research and figure out what reoccurring problems you can solve. The research then helps inform the type of audience which will benefit from what you can teach. The second is to build an audience around a specific message. When you have a specific message, people are interested in your message and ethos and will be drawn to you. So, for instance, you can take the two big giants, Microsoft and Apple, right? The first one is all based on market research. Microsoft, they're just marketing you all the specs. They're like, look at this is a fantastic thing, and they've got their audience. Apple is all their marketing is based around an ethos and understanding of this product is for a certain type of person that is interested in our specific message. It is for, you know, the rebels, the people who are out there who want to make a change, who think outside the box. So these are the two approaches. And obviously, as young creatives, we're not going to have the funds and research ability to go and do market research. So catering your brand around a specific message is a way to work your way around that system. So the big thing with social media is there's this pressure for us to build a huge following, millions. You haven't made it until you've hit 1,000, 10,000 followers. You know, that's the assumption that people have. But I love how Kevin Kelly's words in his book. He says, to be a successful creator, you don't need 1 million to make a living as a craftsman, photographer, musician, designer, author, animator, entrepreneur, or inventor. You need only 1,000 true fans. Doesn't that relieve the pressure? It's not 10,000, it's only 1,000. That's a lot more doable in the short term, right? So 1,000 true fans. And he actually has a whole calculation on how he works it out. It's like if a true fan is someone who will pitch up at every single one of your events. He'll pitch up at the first event you have, to the reboot of the same book, because he just loves you. They'll drive across the country to come and see your work because they have invested themselves in you. And if you had 1,000 of them spending only $100 a month, imagine the sort of revenue you'd cover. So if you understand the fact that you just need 1,000 fans, now you need to figure out, what do you give those 1,000 fans, right? They're not gonna hang in there just for the sake of you. You need to create some sort of value. And this is where our content buckets come in. So there are 4 key content buckets as I've seen it. The first one is value. The second one is to become known. The third one is the services you provide. And the fourth one is the products you provide. We'll be going through them. So the first question you can ask yourself is, what value can I provide my audience? This allows me to build credibility as I share my expertise and knowledge on a specific field. So even if you haven't reached the expert level, you can still do this. And you do this by sharing authentically the process of your learning journey. So say you're new to illustration, or you're working on a book and you set up your social media in a way, all you have to say is, hey, I am inspiring to do this. And this is my creative journey. Here are the lessons I've learned so far. And so through that process, it's really funny. Through the process of sharing your learning journey, you start to feel and become like an expert to your audience, because they're learning from you. So already there's a sense of expertise built through that process. There's also trust built through that process because you're being open and transparent in how you share what you do. Number two, how do I allow my audience to know me? Now, this is a big one. A lot of people, especially creatives, like to hide behind like avatars of cartoons or, of a funky logo that they've created. But the reality is people want to connect with other people, right? And social media is social. They want to connect with the person behind the work, not the work itself. They might have initially been attracted to your page by the work, but then they want to get to know the person behind it. And that's what keeps them engaged. Blair Enns says, people buy from people they know, like, and trust. This is the process of becoming known, sharing who you are, why do you do what you do, what is your story, what drives you, why are you creating this content? These are important questions for your audience to know. And the more openly you share them, the more likely they are to connect with you. It's just like any relationship that you might have in real life. As your relationship with the person grows, you share a little more about your life and you go deeper and deeper. And with each level, the relationship is built and strengthened. And we approach this in much the same way, but this time you have an audience across the world. So you could be making friends all over the world, not just in Dublin, not just in the UK. Number three, how can I let people know about the services I provide? So show, don't tell. Share your process. So as an illustrator, I like to break down the problems I am solving through teaching the process I went through to solve it. So say somebody approaches me for a specific project, I like to make a behind the scenes video that just talks about why I made those choices that I made and how I approach the project. The process of then sharing this information provides value because people get insight into how to approach this specific project and why I approached it this certain way. And it displays expertise and demonstrates the service you provide. So you're hitting 3 stones with 1 bird, right? You're providing value for people because they're getting insight into how to approach a specific type of problem solving. Number 2, you're showing them how they can solve it. And through that process of teaching them how you can do that, you've demonstrated your expertise, not only for the person learning, but also for your potential client, because now there's a clear marking of how you've approached a problem. And they're like, oh, if he can solve that problem, he can solve that problem for us. And number 4, how can I let them know about the products I provide? Now, this can be done in conjunction with teaching or sharing your knowledge. It could be just something that you wear in the background. So, hey, I make t-shirts. I just have to wear them. And now people know that the product's available. Or it can be in conjunction with how you teach. So you develop tools to help other people. And those tools are then your products. So you could make a brush that you really like to use, but then other illustrators will also benefit from that process. And so you could use it. Or you could write a manual on how to approach writing for picture books. And you break down just the basic process of how to approach it and what are the things to consider. And now you've got a little book on how to make books. And that becomes a product that can help your potential audience to become better themselves. So I like to break this whole content bucket into 80% of my time sharing value, 10% becoming known, 5% on services, and 5% on products. That's just my breakdown. You need to figure out what works for you. All right. So this is super important. And I love how Christo says this. Don't market to them, serve them. Do this in a generous spirit with zero expectations. Improve their lives. Teach them something useful in a novel way. And this is what I mean by you're not marketing to them when you're talking about your products, your services. You're actually sharing how you do something. You're sharing how you solve a problem. And so you're giving value to them. And you're not expecting them to like buy from you, but through the process that happens automatically. This is the most important part. Connect. It's a social platform. It's made for connections. This is where you should be building your community. Now that you're producing and sharing content, it's important that you spend time interacting with that audience you're growing. Build relationships, strengthen connections. People sell you better than any ad. So if you make an amazing product for somebody and they love the process they went through to work with you, they're going to tell their friends. And their friends are going to tell their friends, and it goes on. Word of mouth is still one of the most powerful ways for you to get hired to do something, because people trust other people and you are being vetted via the connection. And so if you're building connections with real life people, you're sharing authentically, sharing without expectation, you've built a connection. And by deepening this, by answering questions that people might put into the comments or responding to people in the DMs, this shows that you care. Don't ignore them. They're your audience. They're super important to your whole growth in social media. That's the whole point. Obviously, there will be trolls as well, and just ignore them. You know, one person's comment doesn't take away from all the value you've given over time. So the more time you spend interacting with other relevant connections, the algorithm is also going to reward your attention and continue to show you and your post to those people. So this is the other important fact. The reality is all these social platforms are built for interaction, right? And they want you to continue to interact with the content that's created on the platform. And so if you are interacting with content, so like for instance, if you're a writer, children's book writer or an illustrator, and you want to be relevant, you need to interact with other children's book writers, authors, publishers, and that then teaches the algorithm what you're interested in, and they'll keep showing that content to you. And the same will happen for you, because you get the suggested post. That's because the algorithm has read the process you've gone through in your scrolling habits, and it's made some calculations and said, okay, these are the type of people who are relevant to this person, and thus I'm going to show this type of content. If you're going to spend all your time scrolling and looking at like cool clothes, that's not going to help you. You're going to get an algorithm that just keeps showing you like Nike, Vans, and all the rest, but that's not going to help you connect with real life people. They're just big brands. So make those connections relevant. Be specific, be intentional. And the other thing that's important is every social platform wants you to use native content. Native content basically means you're not reposting from TikTok into Instagram, because that then becomes a demerit on your account. You could be potentially blacklisted for that. Because they don't want you to share other people's content. They want you to create content on their platforms. And this goes across all social apps, because they make their money when you're interacting on their apps. And so why not make use of the tools that they provide and maximize that, versus trying to do the lazy job of cutting across, or use something that is outside of that and post directly onto each of these apps. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So this is super important. Blair Ann says, speak softly and people will lean towards you. Speak loudly and they lean away. So this is a really great insight into how you're making connections. You're not shouting on your post every 5 minutes, hey, I got a new product, buy from me, 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 buy from me. Nobody's going to be interested in that, right? You need to be creating value. You need to be drawing them in. You need to be telling them a little bit about you, drawing them closer, whispering about the different things you've created. And this then creates an authentic connection. So you can do all these things, but if you are not consistent, it's not going to work. These social platforms, again, work on consistency. The more consistent you are, the algorithm's then going to reward you for that consistency. Not only that, people are going to reward you for that consistency. If you say to people you're going to be posting information or insight about something specific every Friday and you stop doing that, then they don't see you as reliable, right? If you're going to be sharing certain valuable information that they're looking out for. So the more consistently you show up and make sure your content is consistent, valuable, this builds loyalty and it grows your audience. If you want to grow your influence, it begins with serving people. The more you give in a genuine, authentic manner, the more people will want to give back to you. So share your tips for free. Do live sessions. Have Q&A sessions where you share your information without bias, without any strings attached. Give to people. And in the process of serving, others will want to help you. It's really funny how that works, but this is how people work. It's generative. You know, when you give, people want to give back. It's a reaction. It's automatic, but it has to be authentic. And most people can smell if it's not authentic and you're doing it just for the likes or you're doing it just for more followers. So be authentic in your approach to people, and people will pay you back with loyalty and love and a relationship. Okay. So that's it from me on my top tips on how to maximize social media. So number 1 was know your audience, right? You can't serve an audience you do not know. Number 2, content buckets. Be strategic about the content that you create. There's 4 questions you need to ask yourself. What value can I provide my audience? How do I allow my audience to know me better? How can I let people know about the services I provide? And how can I let people know about the products I provide? Number 3, make connections. A social platform requires you to be social. So be social. Use the DMs, use comments, and don't just think about your own page. You should be interacting with other people's pages. You should be commenting on their work. You should be encouraging them as much as they are encouraging you. It's a two-way stream. Number 4, consistency is key. And to grow, you need to serve your community. Thank you all. At this stage, I think we'll take questions.
That's great, Ashwin. Thank you so much. We've got a few questions in. Some came through on private messages. So maybe one of the first things we'll do is, because you've been great at talking about like the general, like your 4 steps, but I guess, and you even mentioned how important it was to tailor your content specifically for each platform. I wonder if you'd be able to like talk us through how you'd go about like creating, like, first of all, I suppose, individual posts on, let's say, Instagram, and then how to like keep it consistent. And then maybe you'd also talk us through how you kind of, especially as you're an illustrator, and even we could see from your presentation, very visual, how you kind of switch around your content strategy for less visual platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter.
Plug my laptop in so it doesn't die. So how do I tailor content? So number one, you need to think about the type of platform you're working on, right? So for instance, Instagram, you got a square format, maximize the use of the square format. Also think about the new features that each platform provides. So right now, Instagram is focused on fighting YouTube and TikTok. So they're rewarding people who do reels and video content. So maximize the potential of that, because they're going to reward organic growth to anybody who's going to use reels and all the new features that they have.
Yeah, would you actually, I'm thinking of myself. I don't know how to use a reel. So if you were to like advise, and it could even be, so let's say a lot of people in the Society of Young Publishers, they're either looking to enter into the world of publishing, and they might be using Instagram to just for their own kind of creating like a Bookstagram account, or within their like organization. How would you use a reel?
So you could share something like, these are my top 3 books of this week. And you do a little review of the books. You could dive into, you could do a more in-depth version as well. Just pick one book and be like, why did you love these illustrations? Why did you love the text? What about the story is thrilling to you? You could, other thing you could do is you can share your studio space. What does my studio space look like? You know, most people glamorize the idea of what a studio is. The reality is, this is my table and this is where I do all my writing. You could share the process you go through in creating your work. So what does my day look like? Whether it's like I wake up, have coffee, then I have to do this morning meditation, and that then gears me up for the rest of the day. Sharing your authentic, you know, rituals, as it were.
Great. And I also thought it was very interesting that you mentioned there is the reality that publishing is a business. If I can ask, how do you think a person translates it, either if their overall goal from using social media is to either sell a product or to get a job, basically? How do you, I suppose, stay focused on that goal? I know that might be a hard question to.
So social media is a platform to connect with people. So think of it more of a space to network versus a space to sell. And in the off chance, you through that connection, you then will get a potential job, or you then get a potential connection that connects you to something else.
Yeah.
This is just like the highway to a connection.
Yeah.
Versus, you know, taking all
looking at it. Yeah. Great. And yeah, just to speak a little bit more about, let's say with Twitter, how would you use Twitter?
So I am not so versed at Twitter because I tend to be much more visual. But from what I know of friends I have who are more writers than illustrators, the tendency is to create conversation. Twitter is all about words, right? So you want to spark a conversation. You want to ask poignant questions that will then build this deeper conversation that then spirals out of control, or just build a community that is specific to your interest. So if you're a writer, and so, hey, what is your top tips on how to do this? And you're putting it out to the specific writer group, and then you'll have all kinds of comments, and then from that you might find an interesting topic based on their interaction, and then you can go, this person said this, what are your thoughts on this? Have you approached it this way? And this then continues that spiral of conversation. Again, it's all about connections, right? It was a lot better at organic reach earlier on, but now it's starting to turn into this like this rabbit hole. So you have to be careful with Twitter. There's so much depression and like dark news out there where like you just get attacked for anything you say. So just be careful about any of these platforms. They always have good aspects, but there's also negative things. And so how you use it, you need to be careful about yourself, your health, your mental issues as well. So how you approach it has to be careful as well.
Yeah, that's really nice. Or good advice as well. And have you dived into TikTok or BookTok? I know Jess, who you spoke with earlier, is recently kind of speaking with various book talkers because it's just exploded in the past few months. And I don't know if you've entered that space.
I haven't. No.
Yeah.
I feel like TikToks for the next generation. I'm struggling to keep up with all the. I can't do dances and stuff. So if it's
Yeah.
something,
Well, it's refreshing to hear that you're afraid. I won't say I'm afraid, but I'm cautious.
but like I think one platform that is really underrepresented is LinkedIn. Okay, there is fantastic potential for any creative to use LinkedIn. And I think every creative should be on LinkedIn. Here's why. LinkedIn is made for businesses, right? And you are potentially a small business looking to share your services. Now, where do you attract the people who are interested in your services? You have to be in the same space as them. And if all the businesses are on LinkedIn, that's where you should go. Go to them. Number two, you have an advantage because you're creative and you can make your feed look beautiful. You can create really nice pictures, or you could make your words sound amazing if you're a writer. You know, you have that advantage over somebody else. You could write a really brilliant story that ties or pulls people into this valuable lesson you're trying to teach them. And that, again, will build connections. And so I think LinkedIn is really something that every creative should utilize. Number three, how you could use it is because it has all the businesses, there is potential to find out who's working there. You know, like the big thing is with publishers, you're like, I don't know who's there. You know,
and you mightn't have a scale of how big or small the actual working community there is.
Yeah, it feels like often it feels like you're just writing to a wall because it's just like a giant brand. But the cool thing about LinkedIn is you can go into a brand and you can say, who's working there? What job do they do? You can look down and figure out who is the editor for children's books or picture books and be like, that's Emma. Okay, let's see Emma in social media. Where else are they? You start interacting with them, you build a connection with them. And now you have someone you can relate to as a human being versus a brand.
And it can be very interesting as well, especially I know for myself, I'm new to publishing, and it's interesting on LinkedIn, you can kind of see how other people entered publishing. So you might see like unexpected steps on their career path. And I find that interesting and encouraging. So it's quite nice. Okay, some of the other things, like you spoke a lot about how like getting to know your audience. Like how do you kind of, I suppose, if you're starting to get to know your audience, how do you do that? Would you find like posing questions? And I thought it was very interesting, yourself and your wife shared a lot in your video. I think that would be something that's hard to do, to like share so much of yourself. So maybe you give some advice on being like very open and yet protecting yourself. And
with anything, you need to be, number one, confident in your own identity. Okay, that's aside from anything else that you might do. And so for me, I know I'm very confident in who I am and that how I'm created. And no matter what people say, that's not going to change the fact that I'm made the way I am. So that's one thing you need to take time to do for yourself. And you need to be able to separate yourself from your work. So your value is in who you are, not what you do. So regardless of if you are a successful writer or illustrator, that doesn't change the value of who you are. So that's one. Number two, you can be vulnerable. If it's not something you're comfortable with, don't share it. Like my wife wouldn't have been able to share it 5 or 6 years ago. But after going through all of this and healing, now she has the ability to do that. And so it's also a time game. Not everything is relevant at the moment that it happens. You know, you don't have to put yourself through that additional pain just for some social connections, you know? So you'll build up to that.
Perfect. Now what else, other questions did we have here? So if you were like, for myself or for anyone else sort of like me, maybe someone who's either looking to enter, like to be published, or someone to work in publishing, what skills would you start? Would you recommend developing? So, for example, and actually one of our comments that came through was just about how beautiful your presentation is. Like, how do you? I don't even know how you'd go about creating something like that. So maybe you talk us through. You obviously have a broad range of digital skills.
Can you reframe that question? How do I present my work?
I guess what I'm wondering is, so for someone like myself, what skills would you recommend developing? Certainly, like we've talked about, like your confidence and knowing who you are, but I'm thinking more the practical skills. So we'll say like video editing. Do you use like what Illustrator platforms? Is it Canva? That kind of thing.
So yeah, there's a broad range of tools that you should be learning, or at least it's helpful to learn until you can hire someone to do that stuff. And so understanding the basics of design is handy. There's lots of stuff online where you can pick up basic tools. A lot of non-designers use Canva. I personally, because I work in the design field before I became an illustrator, I work with Photoshop, Adobe, all the classic softwares. And for my illustration, I use a mix of Procreate and then things like Photoshop. So it's a mix of those. So I'd say, depending on what your focus is on, use a platform that best suits you. You don't have to use Instagram. Instagram's better suited for people who are visual, whereas, a writer is better suited to Twitter or even LinkedIn. So like you can pick the platform specific to you that'll best utilize your skills. And so you could be very clever with how you do words, how maybe you could have like an idea of the day, or you could run a small interactive exercise with the audience where you write a story with them, say, hey, I'm writing a story, help me name the character. Okay, where do they live? Okay, now let's go through this thing. And you could use the platform to essentially write a whole children's book if you wanted.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah,
it's a question of just thinking outside the box and not saying, this is social media, I'm not going to do anything, because you're missing out on the potential of what you could use it for. Number two, it also is a great way of vetting, say, content that works and doesn't work to a level. So you could share an idea and say, hey, what do you guys think? And you'll get like a certain level of response. And you can say, okay, this topic keeps turning up. Maybe I should write something about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can identify kind of gaps or niches. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, and I thought I would ask your own daily routine. So you are a freelancer, and you're freelance. Maybe you tell us a little bit about how you actually apportion your time, because social media is a full-time job, and there are, like in bigger publishing companies, there would be someone perhaps even dedicated to individual platforms. But how do you, as kind of a one person operation, manage to divide your time? And do you, for example, like try and mute your social media at any point in the day? Or maybe you can give some advice on that.
Yeah. So how I break up my day, like I start the day with doing some sort of exercise if possible. Then the first thing I do is emails to kind of get all the admin stuff out of the way. And then I'll dive into whatever work that I might have. And because I don't see myself as a freelancer, I see myself as a small business or an independent owner or a solopreneur. A freelancer is, I think this definition gets lost in translation most often because it's in the name. The name defines it. So it comes from freelancers. So like lancers who hired themselves, so mercenaries who go into a workplace and then work for that specific job. Whereas a solopreneur is a business. And I think a lot more illustrators and writers need to start thinking of themselves as independent businesses that are interacting with other people.
That's really nice. Yeah, I must appropriate that word. Yeah, anyone for me. Nice.
Yeah. So the other thing is being strategic about your content. Okay, you don't want to be overwhelmed with having to post every day or whatever. So the best thing to do is create a strategy for yourself. So myself, I created themes for days of the week that I wanted to post. So for instance, Monday could be Inspiration Monday, Tuesday is Motivation Tuesday, Wednesday is or Thursday was Thoughtful Thursday, and Friday was Feature Friday. So I was featuring somebody else's work every Friday.
Very nice.
And so like you don't have to do it every day, but whatever you choose to do, just do it consistently over time. And so by breaking up the theme, or like, this is the sort of thing I want to do, it becomes a lot easier because I've already set a theme. So like, what's a motivational quote? I just have to look for that and then create something and post, you know? And the other thing is you can divide it into the content buckets as well. So number one is value. So what can I teach this week? Number two was how to get known. So maybe I can create a reel, or I can do a live where I share a little bit about me. Number three, what service can I share about this week? What product can I share about it? You got 4 days, 4 content buckets. You can put those into action.
Brilliant. And yeah, that kind of, I suppose, leads me nicely to my next question. So you seem to kind of have unending ideas, but how do you kind of keep the ideas churning? How do you keep your creativity coming?
So that's a whole other workshop in itself.
Quite likely.
Yeah. But like, so idea generation is, the reality is creativity is a muscle. A muscle that needs to be exercised. Much like if you're going to do a run, or if you're going to run for a marathon, you're going to take the time to practice so you can get there. And so same with creativity, you have to set challenges for yourself. Creativity thrives within boundaries. Most people want an open brief, but that's the death of a creative, because you're like, oh, I don't even know where to start. But if you have like a constraint, you're like, okay, this is going to be made for 12 to 14-year-olds. Okay, it's going to be adventure fantasy specifically. It's going to be set in blah blah blah. I want to have one wizard, one blah blah, one blah blah. You're setting parameters for your approach to creativity. Now the real challenge starts is, okay, the parameters are set. How can I creatively write a story using these specific characters, using this specific theme, this location? Let's put that information together. So creativity is actually, more than anything, is like pulling lots of different ideas and fusing it together. You know, you're seeing the world from a different, interesting perspective. The other thing is curiosity. Okay, you have to be curious about the world, about life, and not just about your specific topic, because most often the ideas that you get are generated from, say, a movie you watched, or a book you read, or this conversation you had with your friend over coffee, or something that you observed while riding the public transport. You know, these are little cues, and if you're looking for them, you then have a bank of ideas that you could potentially do. So carrying a journal, or you have your phone, making sure you take notes of these observations that you make, is another way that you can create a bank of ideas, because ideas come and go. Or if you write them down, then you have access to them again. You'll be like, okay, now let's dig deeper into this idea.
Great. And from the sounds of things, Ashwin, you're also very organized. And I think that that's kind of come through from your talk. So your organizational skills seem like excellent. Do you find you ever get distracted or into the, like, so one of my worst social media sins is just kind of getting lost in threads, and then I don't contribute. You know, I'm just present. How do you avoid those kind of pitfalls, or is it just good discipline? Or
I think discipline plays a large part, but it's also intentionality. What are you using the social media for? And if you have set a schedule for yourself or a routine, creating routines is a great way to then avoid things, because you could be like, okay, I have a set time where I need to post stuff and get stuff done. Okay, I've done my social stuff, I've done my interaction. Okay, I need to move on to the next thing. So you could set a timer for yourself so that you don't go down that rabbit hole. And that way, like the timer is an indication, okay, it's time. You need to move on to the next task. Especially for someone who's a solopreneur, it's so important to create routines and discipline, because that's the only way you're going to get stuff done. Number two, you need to have vision and goals. Okay. If you do not know where you're going, how are you going to get there? You know, if you don't set a goal to, hey, I want to get published by this time this year, you're not going to take the intentional steps to do that.
Yeah.
So you have to have a vision of where you want to go, and the goals are the stations along the way. And so like each goal is like, oh, okay, you're that much closer to your destination. And the vision could be a lifelong
absolutely, yeah. And your journey
right?
has been quite quick. I'm embarrassed by how little I achieved in the pandemic in comparison to yourself, but it's very, very inspiring. And I'm gonna one question, and then we'll end with a lovely comment that one of our attendees shared. But do you kind of limit your time, or are you always working, or always thinking of your brand? So like, I think a danger, and I mean, equally, it can be a positive, like you have the potential to always connect with your audience. Do you try and switch off at the weekends, or do you, will say, take a Wednesday off, or like after a certain time? So I know you mentioned boundaries as well with your like personality, or like your personal like life. You manage your time as well.
Yeah, it's important to set boundaries for yourself. Otherwise, especially as working alone, you tend to work nonstop. Luckily for me, I have 3 kids to distract me constantly. So it's,
they set the boundaries. Yeah,
they help set the boundaries, and then I try to avoid working on weekends as much as possible. So like Saturday, Sunday is like a no work day. You're just spending time with the family as much as possible. Sometimes there are workshops that happen then, but like most of the day,
and no social media work you put under the social media bracket.
Yeah,
that's wise. And then I suppose our last thing, thank you for also handling all the rapid fire questions, but we had a lovely comment from one of the attendees who says, no question, I just wanted to say that was such a beautiful and fun presentation. The animated illustrations were so engaging and a great example in themselves of how Ashwin has tailored his own work towards a more presentation format. Really inspiring, colorful, fun, but still professional. So yeah, I must echo that comment, and I love the shape of your letters. They're very fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we've got just lots of nice comments, and I think unless anyone has a final question, have you any last words on this Monday, the last Monday in November? Oh no, I could be wrong with that. I won't start trying to count the days, but if you want to, we'll give you the platform once again in these last minutes.
Well, I suppose don't be afraid of social media, and make use of it. Treat it as a tool versus something you have to do, you know, and then you can maximize it. So like if it's a paintbrush, you're going to use it for a specific act versus being drawn into it just because you're not going to carry a paintbrush around all the time, right? You're going to use it when you're painting. Same with social media. You use it for the specific tasks that you set for it. And you get to choose the parameters of those tasks.
Yeah, that's good.
And number 2, you know, like spend time ensuring that you are mentally secure in your identity, because I think a lot of the interaction on social media can hit that quite hard, especially if you haven't built like a tough skin when there's a lot of negativity out there. So don't give in to that, you know, set parameters for yourself, ensure that you're confident in your own ability, make sure you're interacting with real life people, super important, and use the platform to build new friends. So like I've built lots of new friends through it. So you start on the social platform and then you take it off platform. So you might meet them online and they're like, say, hey, let's go get a coffee. We're in the same city. We're both writers. Let's do something about our careers. You know,
absolutely, yeah.
It's an opportunity for you to do more.
That's brilliant. And thank you so much, Ashwin. And thank you to everyone who attended. I know we are the SYP. We're excited to offer something different. And I think we're all, you'll have lots of new followers, I think. So thank you again.
Thank you all. I am so happy to have done this. And thank you, SYP, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. And see you at a forthcoming event.
Bye.